In the contemporary fishing community of Kashega, Alaska, the sea remained a source of livelihood and a constant threat. The men and women who worked these waters respected the ocean's power. Still, they relied on its bounty to sustain their families. It was a life of hard work and uncertainty, where each trip could bring either fortune or disaster. The first sign of trouble came quietly, almost unnoticed. A fishing boat failed to return one evening. The Coast Guard was alerted and a search was initiated. They found the boat adrift, its crew of 4 missing. The vessel showed signs of damage, as if it had been struck by something large and powerful. The community mourned the loss, but accidents were not uncommon in these dangerous waters, so they forgot about them quickly. However, it happened again. Another boat was found wrecked, its crew of 3 missing and later found dead. The pattern became impossible to ignore as more boats were discovered and destroyed, and their crews were gone. When the number of fishermen killed was counted, it was up to 17 in just 3 months. This sent waves of fear and grief through Kashega. Theories and rumors spread like wildfire. Some blamed rogue waves, others spoke of a curse, while a few whispered about a monstrous sea creature. Desperation grew, and the local authorities and Coast Guard could not provide answers. The town needed help, someone who could decipher the mystery behind the tragedies. Enter Dr. Claire Roberts, a renowned marine biologist specializing in oceanography and sea creatures' behavior. Her arrival in Kashega was met with both hope and skepticism. Claire's reputation preceded her. She was known for her deep understanding of marine life and ability to solve complex ecological problems. Claire's first task was to examine the boat's wreckage. The damage was unlike anything she had ever seen. The hulls were torn apart, splintered by immense force. Her initial hypothesis pointed to a rogue wave or an underwater seismic event. Still, the regularity and specificity of the attacks suggested a more deliberate perpetrator. Her suspicions were confirmed when she examined some of the bodies. The injuries were consistent with those inflicted by a large marine predator. Deep gashes and bite marks indicated the presence of a powerful jaw and sharp teeth. The pattern of the wounds and the sheer strength required to inflict such damage narrowed the list of suspects. It pointed unmistakably to an orca. Orcas, known as killer whales, were apex predators and brilliant creatures. They were known to exhibit complex behaviors and could hunt in packs. However, attacks on humans were exceedingly rare. Orcas typically avoided human interaction and had never been known to target fishing boats so systematically. Claire faced a baffling anomaly, an orca driven by an unknown rage singling out fishermen and their vessels. Claire set out to gather more data. She equipped a research vessel with underwater cameras and acoustic equipment, hoping to capture evidence of the rogue orca's behavior. She spent days on the water, scouring the coastline and monitoring the movements of marine life. Her efforts were initially fruitless. The sea seemed to hold its secrets tightly, offering no clues. Then, one foggy morning, Claire's patience was rewarded. The cameras picked up movement beneath the surface, a large shadow gliding silently through the depths. The footage was grainy but unmistakably showed an orca, its black and white markings distinctive even in the murky water. Claire's heart raced as she reviewed the footage. This was no ordinary orca. Its behavior was erratic and aggressive. It circled the research vessel, ramming it with alarming force before disappearing into the gloom. Claire analyzed the acoustic data, searching for anomalies in the orca's vocalizations. She discovered something unexpected. The orca's calls were atypical, filled with distress and agitation. Orcas communicated using a complex language of clicks and whistles, and the vocalizations Claire recorded were unlike anything she had encountered before. They were haunting, a cry of rage and pain that sent chills down her spine. Determined to understand the cause of the orca's behavior, Claire delved into the region's recent history. She discovered that the local fishing industry had significantly changed in the past year. Overfishing had depleted the stocks of salmon and herring, the primary food sources for orcas. In their desperation to maintain their catch, some fishermen resorted to illegal practices, including using explosives to stun the fish, causing immense disruption to the marine ecosystem. Claire hypothesized that the rogue orca's aggression directly responded to these disruptions. The depletion of food sources and the violent methods used by the fishermen had likely traumatized the animals. It was acting out of a primal survival instinct, lashing out at the perceived threat to its existence. With this understanding, Claire knew that stopping the orca would require addressing the root causes of its behavior. She convened a meeting with the fishermen, presenting her findings and urging them to change their practices. The reception was mixed. Some were sympathetic, recognizing their role in the crisis. In contrast, others were skeptical and unwilling to acknowledge the impact of their actions on the marine environment. Claire faced an uphill battle. The fishermen's livelihoods were at stake, and the community was divided. She knew persuading them to adopt sustainable practices would take time and effort. She continued her research, documenting the orca's movements and vocalizations and gathering evidence to support her case. In the meantime, the attacks continued. Another boat was found adrift, and its crew was missing. The fear in the village intensified, and the calls for more drastic measures grew louder. Some demanded that the orca be hunted and killed, viewing it as a monster that needed to be eradicated. Claire was determined to prevent such an outcome. She believed that understanding and addressing the underlying causes of the orca's behavior was the only way to resolve the crisis. So she sought allies among environmental organizations and government agencies. The breakthrough came when a group of fishermen, led by a respected elder, agreed to participate in a pilot project. They adopted sustainable practices, using less invasive methods, and reducing their catch to allow the fish stocks to recover. The rogue orca's behavior began to change. The attacks decreased in frequency, and the animal's vocalizations became less distressed. Claire believed that the orca was responding to the improved conditions, sensing that the threat to its survival was diminishing. Despite these positive developments, tensions remained high. Some factions within the community continued to call for more aggressive action, viewing the orca as an ever-present danger. Claire knew that lasting change would require a fundamental shift in attitudes and practices, which could take years. In time, the fishing community of Kashiga began to heal. The fishermen adapted to the new practices, improving their catches as the marine ecosystem recovered. The orca sightings became less frequent, and the animal seemed to have found peace. In 2001, the atmosphere in Ocean Majesty Marine Park was charged with palpable excitement, as if the entire town was pulsating with the thrum of an electric current. This year was marked by clear skies and sunny days, setting the perfect backdrop for the season's most awaited event. Today was no ordinary day at the park. It was the debut of Titan, a colossal orca recently transferred from another marine reserve specifically for this event. Titan's reputation preceded him. He was known for his impressive size, abilities, and unpredictable nature, which only heightened the anticipation and suspense surrounding his performance. This combination of factors promised an unforgettable show, drawing an eager crowd all set to witness Titan's majestic prowess in action. Parents and children were ready with cameras to capture the moment. The sun shone brightly and cast shimmering reflections in the pool. The day was perfect for a show. Sarah Jennings was a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for the show backstage. She spent weeks with Titan to learn his quirks and gain his trust. She wore a bright blue wetsuit that matched her determination. The show started as the clock struck 3. Sarah entered the arena confidently, waving at the cheering audience. Titan jumped gracefully out of the water after she gave the signal. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah sat on Titan's back and they performed stunning dives. As the show neared its conclusion, the energy level changed. The cheers of the crowd grew louder and the clapping increased. Titan, a sensitive orca, began to become agitated. He ignored Sarah's orders. Sarah touched his snout lightly as a gesture of comfort between them. The noise continued to grow. The speakers blared music and children screamed with delight. Titan, overwhelmed by the situation, acted out. He grabbed Sarah's foot in his mouth during a routine dive. This was not done out of aggression, but rather confusion and fear. The audience gasped in confusion, not knowing if it was part of the performance. Sarah struggled with her release and she called out to the other trainers in her heartbeat. Titan dove, pulling her underwater swiftly. Sarah tried to stay calm underwater. She knew panicking would make the situation worse. She gently stroked Titan's head to reconnect with her gentle giant. Above them was a flurry of activity as her team desperately tried to solve the crisis. Sarah was under pressure underwater as she struggled to resist Titan's grip. Only her training as an orca trainer kept Sarah calm in this dangerous situation. She knew that sudden movements might trigger a hostile response from an already distressed orca. Above the water, the crowd was in a quiet silence. The excitement of earlier had been replaced with a cloud of worry. Parents covered their kids' eyes, and whispers about worry spread throughout the stands. Staff at the marine park worked tirelessly to get Titan to let Sarah go. They offered him food and threw his favorite toys to get his attention. Submerged and out of oxygen, Sarah realized she had to conserve her energy and oxygen. She resisted the urge to fight and stayed as still as possible, trying to calm herself and the orca holding her. She was desperate for answers as her air was rapidly running out. The control room decided to dim the music and calm the crowd using the announcer. Titan's agitation began to decrease as the environment changed. Once frenzied with confusion, his eyes began to return to normal. Michael Andrews, the trainer in charge, appeared to be urgently directing the rescue operation. His voice was steady as he issued commands, and he carried the weight and urgency of the situation with determination, focused on saving his friend and colleague. The tension increased as the minutes passed. Sarah's lungs were screaming for air, and Titan's grip began to loosen as Sarah's consciousness started to fade. It was almost tangible that his behavior had changed, as if suddenly he realized he wasn't in danger. With a last-ditch effort, the trainers diverted Titan long enough to allow Sarah to escape. The emergency response team was there to help her as she gasped for air. As the crowd watched her surface, they erupted in applause, relief, and cries. Sarah was taken to a medical station, and the show abruptly ended. The park released statements to the media and the shocked audience explaining that the strange behavior was a reaction to the loud noises and promising to review their animal care protocol. Titan was then closely monitored and given extra training in the weeks following to help him better adapt to the stress of performing. Sarah took a short leave to reflect on her traumatic experience. She returned to the show with a renewed dedication to animal welfare and a desire to change how the shows are conducted to prevent incidents like this. Marine park staff learned an essential lesson about crowd control and animal behavior. They revised their guidelines to prioritize the comfort and safety of the animals and the humans who handle them. Titan performed under stricter conditions, and all staff were better informed about the signs of animal distress. The tragic event between Sarah and Titan forged a bond based on mutual respect and shared experience. It could have been much different. Ocean Majesty Marine Park staff and community will always remember the day that the line was drawn between safety and entertainment in the Orca pool. In the summer of 2005, it happened in Santa Cruz, California, a beach town renowned for its beautiful coastline and lively surf culture. Thousands of visitors and locals flocked to the Santa Cruz Beach Festival, which features live music, food trucks, surf competitions, and water sports every year. That particular day's weather was ideal, with bright blue skies, a gentle breeze, and the sun beaming off the Pacific. While many people had a happy and celebratory day, some would never forget the nightmare that unfolded that day. For many years, Santa Cruz has been a well-known beach resort. The town, whose history dates back many years, was formerly home to many fishermen but now prospers from tourism. The sea has always been a source of mystery and life for the people there. Due to the seals and sea lions that frequent the kelp forests nearby, great white sharks were known to live in these waters. Despite the sporadic sightings, shark attacks were uncommon, and most locals and tourists had grown accustomed to the ocean as a playground rather than a wilderness. That year's festival was incredibly crowded, drawing an estimated 10,000 people to the beach. The O'Connell family, Mark, a general contractor in the area, his wife Teresa, and their two teenage sons, Derek and Lucas, were among the attendees. Another person there was Kira Vance, a nearby San Jose college student who had come with her pals to enjoy the sun and possibly try paddleboarding. Although nobody could have foreseen the danger gradually approaching, a lifeguard team led by seasoned surf lifesaver Brad Buzz Garrison carefully watched the waters alongside them. As the afternoon wore on, a subtle shift started to show in the ocean. The people on the beach were unaware that a 14-foot great white shark had been lured nearer the coast. The normally tranquil waters had been disturbed by increased human activity and food waste thrown into the water during the festival. although the warning signs were mostly ignored due to the festival noise and excitement. A few lifeguards noticed unusual behavior among the local seabirds. Things drastically changed in the evening. A local fisherman, Victor Polanski, saw the dark shadow moving beneath the surface while casting lines from a small nearby pier. He initially believed it to be a dolphin or a sizable school of fish, but the water revealed its distinct dorsal fin as it got closer. Victor's heart fell short. However, it was already too late when he finally radioed a warning to the lifeguards. A group of swimmers enjoyed the cool water in the shallows about 50 yards offshore. Among them were Kira Vance and her pals Derek and Lucas O'Donnell. They were unaware that danger was hiding under their feet. Before Kira could react, the water surrounding her turned red, signaling the first sign of trouble. She felt something brush against her leg. Swiftly striking a friend of Kira's who was bodyboarding, the shark's attack was swift. The attack's brutality and suddenness brought on an explosion of panic. The easygoing vibe of the festival was abruptly destroyed by screams that pierced the atmosphere. As they watched the horrifying scene play out, onlookers froze, some paralyzed with fear, and others running toward the shore in a last-ditch effort to escape the water. Buzz Garrison, a lifeguard tower nearby, heard the disturbance and quickly alerted the other guards with a whistle blow. Scurrying towards the water, he seized his rescue board. Troy Klein and Jesse Malone, two additional lifeguards, followed closely behind him. They knew how precious time was and how quickly the shark could strike again. The shark had vanished as soon as it appeared, and the water remained tainted when the lifeguards arrived. While Jesse and Troy assisted in guiding the swimmers still swimming back to the shore, Buzz helped Kira's injured friend onto his board. As everyone rushed to exit the water, tripping over beach chairs and towels hastily, the beach descended into chaos. Festival organizers attempted to restore order as parents cried out for their children, but the damage had already been done. Emergency personnel arrived in minutes, and the wounded were taken directly to the hospital. Regretfully, one of the victims passed away from their wounds before they could be stabilized, meaning they did not survive the attack. Before long, word of the shark attack at the Santa Cruz Beach Festival was circulating throughout the state. The town was in disbelief after that. Although shaken, the O'Connell family was relieved that Derek and Lucas had escaped unscathed. After witnessing her friends suffering in the water, Kira Vance battled survivor's guilt. Following the incident, numerous requests were made to local officials for improved shark activity monitoring, which raised major concerns about beach safety. A team of marine biologists, including Dr. Felicia Cortez of the Monterey Bay Aqua Park, was brought in to evaluate the situation. She explained that the shark was probably drawn closer to shore than it would have normally ventured because of the increased human activity and food waste. However, she warned against demonizing the creature, reminding people that sharks instinctively respond to their surroundings. The town council called multiple emergency sessions over the next few days to discuss avoiding another disaster. Others, like Dr. Cortez, pushed for stronger waste management regulations and improved public education about marine life. Some called for increased shark hunting to lower the local population. The council ultimately decided to enact additional safety measures, such as better lifeguard training for shark-related emergencies and the placement of shark detection buoys along the coastline. The attack deeply scarred Santa Cruz, and many people would never feel completely safe going to the beach again. But it also brought conservation efforts back into the public eye. Dr. Cortez collaborated extensively with neighborhood institutions and groups to spread awareness of sharks' value to the marine environment. Eventually, the community struck a new equilibrium between tourism and environmental conservation. The O'Connell family and Kira Vance would never forget that day. Previously a place of happiness and leisure, the beach had become a sobering reminder of how fleeting life can be. However, they also understood that the locals had banded together in its wake to defend the town's residents and its ocean, demonstrating Santa Cruz's tenacity. It was 2009, and fishing vessels found the North Atlantic waters more dangerous. One of the area's biggest vessels, the Atlantic Seeker, was the reputable commercial fishing company Blue Wavy Fishing. The captain of this ship, Laura Mitchell, was an experienced seafarer with over 20 years of experience in these harsh waters. The vessel was well known for its size and efficiency. Its main goal was to harvest large amounts of in-demand swordfish and tuna, but recently it had to contend with an unanticipated and dangerous threat, a persistent pod of mako sharks. As the autumn winds started to stir up the already turbulent Atlantic, the Atlantic Seeker sailed out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. The group, which included experienced fishermen like Arlo Fenton, a burly first mate, and a quick-witted engineer named Isaac Weiler, had encountered many difficulties while sailing the open ocean, but they were still determining how serious the shark issue they would deal with would be. Sharks had historically been a problem on occasion, attracted to the smell of blood and bait when the crew brought in their catch. But something about this pod of mako sharks was different. They were far more aggressive and unrelenting than the crew had ever seen. The sharks ate the leftover fish, actively attacked the nets, broke equipment, and, most alarming, circled the boat for hours after the fishing had ceased. The crew's annoyance increased after 3 weeks on the journey. Before the valuable catch could even be loaded aboard, the sharks tore into their nets, reducing the size of their hauls. Constant repairs resulted in low morale. The engineer, Isaac, mumbled that the makos appeared almost synchronized, as though they were picking up tricks on the boat. The crew now jokingly referred to them as the Wolf Pack, but the humor did little to hide the underlying fear. And then the storm hit. A sudden gust blew across the North Atlantic on a chilly October night. The Atlantic Seeker rolled erratically in the churning sea as the waves rose suddenly. With her hand steady on the wheel and her eyes searching the horizon, Captain Laura Mitchell stayed on the bridge as the storm tore apart. She had survived storms in the past, but this one was different. Sharks, in addition to the storm, made the sea feel alive beneath her. The smell of fish and the churning waters sent the makos into a frenzy, and they launched a full-scale attack on the vessel. The crew faced an even more terrifying foe, as they struggled to gather supplies and prepare for the storm. The sleek bodies of the sharks struck the boat with a startling force as they started to ram the hull. Arlo, the first mate, was nearly thrown overboard as one particularly aggressive shark attacked the lower deck, snapping its powerful jaws at anything that moved. In the chaos, crew members were injured. One man, a deckhand named Joss, was knocked unconscious when a wave hurled him against a railing. Another junior fisherman named Kellen suffered a deep gash in his leg after slipping and falling onto a broken piece of equipment. The situation was spiraling out of control. With the storm showing no signs of relenting and the sharks continuing their assault, Captain Mitchell knew they had to act fast. She ordered the crew to pull in the remaining lines and nets, but the sharks had already done significant damage. Half of the night's catch was lost, shredded by the makos, and the boat's starboard netting had been torn apart. Battling the elements and the sharks from below deck, Isaac worked tirelessly to keep the engines running, but even he knew they were pushing the Atlantic Seeker to its limits. The crew, beaten and tired, entered the ship and secured the deck. They huddled together for hours while the storm raged outside, constantly reminded of the danger beneath the waves by the sound of sharks biting into the hull. Hoping for a break in the storm and hoping the boat would hold until morning, Captain Mitchell remained on the bridge, her gaze fixed intently on the radar. The storm had passed by dawn, but the damage was inflicted. With its hull smashed, gear scattered, and crew messy, the Atlantic Seeker hobbled toward Halifax. Thankfully, there were no fatalities, even though several of the men, including Joss and Kellen, were taken to the hospital upon arrival. As the storm passed, the sharks vanished, apparently weary of their onslaught. Following this, blue wavy fishing had to make a difficult choice. The crew had been put in danger, and the constant shark attacks had severely impacted the company's earnings. The board of the company and Captain Laura Mitchell agreed that a change was necessary. It was made evident by the incident that the conventional techniques were no longer viable, and that industrial fishing carries significant risks in areas where sharks are prevalent. Weeks after the event, blue wavy fishing implemented new safety measures. The company invested in reinforced shark-resistant nets and installed new sonar systems to detect large predators before they could approach the vessel. They also adopted more sustainable fishing practices designed to minimize the amount of bycatch that had likely been attracting the sharks in the first place. Captain Mitchell, though outwardly stoic, was deeply impacted by the experience. For her, the ordeal was a stark reminder that the ocean, while bountiful, was also unpredictable and dangerous. The sharks had been a force of nature doing what they were meant to do. And if blue wavy fishing wanted to continue operating in those waters, they had to respect that balance. Though the Atlantic Seeker eventually returned to the North Atlantic, it did so with a renewed sense of caution and responsibility. Captain Laura Mitchell continued to lead the crew, who no longer viewed the sharks as simple nuisances, but rather as an intricate and sometimes dangerous part of the ecosystem in which they had chosen to work. The vast expanse of the Arctic spread out in a white wilderness, a landscape so untouched and pristine that it seemed otherworldly. Here, on a remote island encased in ice and snow, Alex, a dedicated documentary filmmaker, had set up his base camp. His mission was to capture the elusive and intimate moments of a colony of seals during mating season. This endeavor promised rare and breathtaking footage. With his camera gear meticulously checked and survival equipment stowed away, Alex embarked on what he hoped would be a career-defining project. The seals were gathered on a vast stretch of frozen shoreline, their slick bodies contrasting sharply against the snow-covered ground. Few humans had ever witnessed this sight firsthand. The seals were busy with ritualistic displays and vocalizations, oblivious to the biting cold and howling winds that swept across the ice. Alex, bundled in layers of thermal gear, carefully navigated the treacherous terrain, his camera capturing the intricate dance of nature. Days passed in a blur of icy winds and breathtaking scenes. Alex became a silent observer, blending into the landscape, his presence barely noted by the seals. The camera's lens allowed him to see the world from a perspective few ever experienced, capturing the raw beauty and harsh realities of life in the Arctic. He documented the nurturing bond between mothers and their pups, the playful antics of younger seals, and the majestic yet brutal battles between males vying for dominance. One frigid morning, as the pale sun barely peeked over the horizon, Alex spotted a massive male seal that seemed to command the attention of the entire colony. This alpha male was an awe-inspiring figure with battle scars etched into his thick hide. Alex knew that getting footage of this dominant seal would be a highlight of his documentary. He approached cautiously, mindful of the animal's territorial nature. Sensing an unfamiliar presence, the alpha male lifted its head and locked eyes with Alex. The filmmaker's heart pounded as he continued to film, inching closer for a better shot. He knew the risks, but was driven by the promise of capturing something extraordinary. Suddenly the seal bellowed, a deep resonant sound that echoed across the ice. It was a warning, clear and unmistakable. Before Alex could react, the massive seal charged, its bulk moving slowly across the frozen ground. Alex's instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He swung his camera, hoping to deter the animal. The seal's attack was relentless, and the camera equipment offered little protection. Alex stumbled, falling hard onto the ice. Pain shot through his leg where the seal's powerful jaws had clamped down, tearing through his thick clothing. Desperation surged through him as he used his tripod to fend off the aggressive seal, each movement a struggle against the searing pain and rising panic. He knew he had to get away, to put distance between himself and the enraged animal. With great effort, he scrambled to his feet, using the tripod to keep the seal at bay as he backed away slowly. The alpha male eventually relented, returning to its territory, but the damage was done. Alex's leg throbbed with pain, the cold seeping into his bones through the torn fabric. The journey back to camp was an agonizing test of endurance and willpower. The extreme cold gnawed at him, sapping his strength and clarity. Though designed for the harsh conditions, his survival gear offered little solace against the pain radiating from his leg. Each step was a battle, his breath forming vapor clouds in the frigid air. Navigating the icy landscape was treacherous. The once familiar terrain seemed like a labyrinth, and each snowdrift and ice formation was a potential hazard. Alex relied on his survival skills, honed over years of filming in extreme environments. The sky darkened, the brief Arctic day giving way to a long, frigid night. Alex knew that stopping was not an option. If he paused, the cold would claim him. He pressed on, his mind focused on reaching his camp. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alex spotted the outline of his base camp. Relief flooded through him, giving him a final burst of energy. He staggered into the camp, collapsing near his tent. With trembling hands, he unpacked his first aid kit and began treating his wounds. The bite marks were deep and infection was a real risk in the harsh conditions. He cleaned the wounds as best he could, applying antiseptic and bandages. The pain was relentless, but Alex knew he couldn't afford to rest. He needed to secure the camp against the cold and ensure he had enough supplies to last until help could arrive. He activated his emergency beacon, a signal that would alert the nearest rescue station to his predicament. The next few days were a blur of pain and cold. Alex rationed his food and water, careful not to overexert himself. As he waited, Alex reflected on the events that had brought him to this point. The attack had been a harsh reminder of the raw power of nature, of the thin line between observer and participant in the wild. He had always known the risks, but experiencing them firsthand was a sobering lesson. Yet despite the pain and fear, he deeply respected the alpha male seal. It had been defending its territory, following instincts honed over millennia of survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. As Alex's strength waned and hope began to dim on the 5th day, he heard the distant hum of an approaching aircraft. The sound grew louder, cutting through the wind. He staggered out of his tent, waving a brightly colored fabric to signal his location. The rescue team descended their presence, a beacon of hope in the frozen wasteland. They quickly assessed his condition, their faces a mix of concern and determination. Alex was lifted into the helicopter. The cabin's warmth starkly contrasted with the biting cold outside. He looked over the vast Arctic landscape as they flew towards the nearest medical facility. The experience had been harrowing, but he had survived. His footage would tell the story of the seals, their fierce beauty, and the challenges they faced in a changing world. The Caribbean sun beat down on the azure waters as boats worldwide gathered for the annual competitive spearfishing tournament. This event was renowned among spearfishing enthusiasts, drawing participants who sought the thrill of the hunt and the prestige of victory. Among the competitors was a team led by Carlos, a seasoned diver known for his skill and calm demeanor under pressure. Carlos and his team had prepared meticulously for this tournament. They had spent months training, honing their skills, and familiarizing themselves with the local marine life. The tournament rules were straightforward. The team that brought back the largest and most impressive catch within the allotted time would be declared the winner. With his vast experience, Carlos knew the waters well and had a strategy in mind. The team suited up and prepared their gear. Each member checked their spear guns, ensuring they were in perfect working order. They reviewed their hand signals and emergency procedures before slipping into the warm, clear water. The ocean enveloped them, its depths teeming with life and possibility. Carlos led the way, descending slowly into the blue abyss. The underwater world was a kaleidoscope of colors and motion, with schools of fish darting in every direction and the coral reef sprawling like an alien landscape. The team spread out, maintaining visual contact while scanning for their quarry. Seconds turned into minutes as they explored the reef, spearing several smaller fish to keep their skills sharp and to build a sense of rhythm. They encountered barracudas, groupers, and even a few sharks. But something else matched the tournament-winning catch criteria. The tension was palpable, but Carlos remained focused, confident their patience would pay off. Carlos saw it during one of these moments of quiet focus. A giant swordfish, more significant than any he had ever encountered, appeared from the depths. Its sleek, powerful body cut through the water with grace and menace. Carlos signaled to his team, pointing out the fish. They regrouped quickly, understanding the gravity of the situation. This was their chance to secure victory, but they needed to approach with caution. The swordfish, however, seemed aware of their presence. Instead of fleeing, it turned and charged toward them with unexpected ferocity. Its long, sharp bill was a formidable weapon, and its aggression caught the team off guard. Carlos barely had time to react as the fish lunged, forcing him to dive to the side to avoid a direct hit. The underwater struggle began in earnest. The swordfish was not just defending itself, it was attacked with uncommon aggression for its species. Carlos and his team had to balance the need to protect themselves to capture the fish. They used their spear guns sparingly, aware that each shot needed to count, and that missing could provoke an even more dangerous response. Carlos closely watched his dive computer, tracking their depth and remaining air. The swordfish made another charge, and one of his teammates barely avoided being struck. Carlos knew they couldn't sustain this cat-and-mouse game much longer. They needed to devise a plan to subdue the fish without putting themselves in further danger. Drawing on his experience, Carlos signaled to his team to try a coordinated approach. They would attempt to tire the swordfish by forcing it to make repeated charges, hoping to exhaust it enough to make a capture feasible. The team positioned themselves strategically, using the reef's terrain to their advantage. They moved in unison, closing the distance to the swordfish. Carlos aimed with his spear gun, targeting a spot just behind the gills where a clean shot would be most effective. He waited for the right moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The swordfish made one last desperate lunge, and Carlos fired. The spear struck true, embedding itself in the fish's side. The swordfish thrashed violently, its powerful body convulsing in an attempt to break free. The team moved quickly to secure the fish and minimize its suffering. They used ropes and additional spears to immobilize it, carefully avoiding its deadly bill. It was a grueling process, but the swordfish's struggles eventually subsided. With the fish subdued, Carlos signaled for the team to begin their ascent. They were mindful of their air supplies, rising slowly to avoid decompression sickness. The ascent felt like an eternity, each meter a reminder of the delicate balance between success and disaster. Breaking the surface, they were greeted by the bright Caribbean sun and the cheers of the tournament officials monitoring their progress. Seeing the giant swordfish hoisted onto their boat was a testament to their skill and determination. It was a catch that would be talked about for years to come. Back on the boat, the reality of their accomplishments began to sink in. The team was exhausted, but the adrenaline still coursed through their veins. They removed their gear and tended to their minor injuries, sharing looks of relief and triumph. Carlos knew this victory was a collective effort, each member playing a crucial role in the success of their mission. The giant swordfish was measured and weighed, and it became clear that Carlos and his team had secured the top spot in the tournament. The announcement was met with applause and admiration from the other competitors. The fish was a true marvel, a once-in-a-lifetime catch that showcased the very essence of the sport. The tournament concluded with a celebratory banquet, where Carlos and his team were honored for their achievement. They received their prizes, but more importantly, they earned the respect of their peers. The story of their encounter with the giant swordfish spread quickly, adding to the legends of the tournament. For Carlos, the experience reminded him why he loved the sea and the sport of spearfishing. It was a world of beauty and danger where skill and courage were constantly tested. The encounter with the swordfish had been a stark reminder of nature's raw power and the respect it demanded. The tribe lived off the coasts of North Island in New Zealand. The waters raged against the cliffs and the beaches, but their lives were closely linked to the sea. The tribe revered a mighty orca called Kaitiaki. It was seen as a spirit of protection and strength. They believed the sea was generous and would reign in peace as long as Kaitiaki lived there. The tranquility of the area was disturbed one fateful morning when, unbeknownst to Kaitiaki, a group unaware of his presence accidentally caught and killed a young calf orca. The calf in question was not any ordinary orca, but Kaitiaki's offspring, whom the ancient protector had been teaching roots and rituals to their kind. The fishermen did not notice the calf's death and thought nothing of it. But Kaitiaki was deeply affected by this incident. After losing its calf, Kaitiaki's protective nature changed into rage and revenge. Swimmers near the shore began reporting unsettling encounters. Boats were damaged mysteriously, and their hulls were struck violently from below. This sent shivers down the spines of those who experienced the orca's anger. The tribe became increasingly afraid of the water, their lifeblood. The elders gathered and whispered about a curse they had received for the death of Kaitiaki's calf. They turned to Tama, their young shaman who was known for his wisdom and connection with the spirit world. Tama was aware of the daunting task he had before him. He needed to bridge the divide between the grieving sea guardian and the fear-filled villages. To do so, he set out on a quest to learn the language spoken by orcas, consulting ancient texts and meditating near the shoreline, where he heard Kaitiaki's mournful cries in the crashing waves. Realizing the severity of the situation, Tama performed a ceremony to appeal to Kaitiaki. He made an offering out of woven reeds, shells, and other symbols of his tribe's life and connection, and set it free in the water where the calf died. The gesture was intended to show remorse and ask for forgiveness. Tribal members on the shore were watching. The sea seemed to churn with anticipation as Kaitiaki approached the massive offering. Orcas circled the floating tribute, their movement suggesting an understanding of its profound significance. At that moment, the ocean appeared to hold its breath, and Tama, witnessing this solemn ritual, was filled with a complex blend of fear and hope, sensing the gravity of the ceremony unfolding before him. As night fell, Tama waited by the water, his eyes fixed on where the stars and the sea met, hoping for a sign. The tribe also waited, occasionally catching a glimpse of Tama's silhouette on the moonlit shore, and wondering if the young shaman could turn their fortune around. Over the day, the calmness of the ocean grew. The water around the memorial became almost eerily calm as the violent swells diminished. Kaitiaki's massive body glided close to shore, causing the water's surface to ripple violently. Tama stood unwaveringly on the shoreline and watched the orca circle the area where the offering floated. The tribe held their breath and waited for the orca's next move. Kaitiaki gently nudged the woven gift with its snout, pushing it toward the beach. The orca made a mournful, long sound as the bundle washed into Tama's foot. Tama considered this an acknowledgement of their apology and a sign that they would communicate and reconcile. Tama, energized by the response, took a further step into the surf. He raised his arms and voice in a chant calling for peace and understanding with the tribe's guardian spirits. Kaitiaki reacted by swimming parallel to the shore. Its movements were slow and deliberate in stark contrast to its previous aggression. The atmosphere changed from tension to tentative relief as dawn broke. Tama and the elders met at first light to discuss the implications of the events that occurred during the night. They agreed that they must take proactive steps to prevent similar tragedies and respect orcas in the future by closely monitoring fishing activities and educating younger generations about Kaitiaki. In the following weeks, the tribe began to change its relationship with the sea. The tribe changed their fishing routes to avoid orca tracks and stationed lookouts to monitor marine life in the area. Tama and a select few of his followers began to make regular offerings to Kaitiaki. This ritual ensured respect and coexistence. As the months passed, the tale of the night Kaitiaki received the tribe's apologies became an essential part of tribal legend. Tama became a respected tribal leader. He was revered for restoring peace and helping bridge the spiritual connection between tribes and orcas. Kaitiaki became a protector, not a feared ghost. The attack stopped. The tribe's bond with their sea guardian was strengthened by mutual respect and understanding. Kaitiaki, the ancient orca, once again guarded the waters and ensured the safety and abundance of the tribe that had learned to respond to their guardian's calls. The tribe's newfound harmony is a testament to their resilience and deep respect for nature. Aquapolis is a futuristic underwater colony nestled in the Caribbean Sea. It was a place of scientific advancement and advanced aquatic engineering. Scientists, engineers, and families lived in harmony with the ocean in this colony, a marvel of technology. Aquapolis hosted a highly secretive military research facility where top scientists were engaged in developing genetic modifications for marine animals aimed at enhancing their defense capabilities. One of their primary subjects, an orca referred to as Subject Delta within the project, was notably unique. This particular orca had undergone enhancements that significantly boosted its intelligence to levels comparable to humans. It had been trained to perform complex tasks and strategic operations, setting it apart from other marine creatures in their studies. Despite extensive security measures, the containment facility at Aquapolis had vulnerabilities. Subject Delta, the orca with enhanced intelligence and growing awareness of its confinement, identified a weak point in its enclosure. With a powerful strike of its tail, it shattered the barrier, causing the facility to flood with seawater. This breach allowed Subject Delta to escape into the open sea. The breach at Aquapolis triggered immediate chaos throughout the colony. Alarms blared, transforming the once peaceful habitat into a zone of panic. The security team, led by Commander Sarah Jennings, sprang into action. Amidst the turmoil, they worked diligently to assess the situation, coordinating efforts to contain the breach and mitigate any further risks to the colony and its inhabitants. As Subject Delta swam among the structures of Aquapolis, It began launching attacks on the colony's infrastructure. The striking black and white form of Subject Delta stood out against the backdrop of bioluminescent plants that adorned the underwater colony. Its first deliberate target was a critical power supply unit near the residential area. By ramming into it, Subject Delta caused blackouts across various sections of the colony, disrupting the normalcy and safety of the habitat. Life support systems started to fail without power, and residents found themselves in desperate situations. Residents were directed to safe zones, and emergency protocols were implemented. Dr. Emily Stanton, one of the foremost marine biologists opposed to militarizing marine life, realized the severity of the threat. The security officers, equipped with submersible vehicles and specialized equipment, tried to intercept the orca. Subject Delta used aggressive tactics to avoid capture. It darted through the colony's buildings, taking advantage of the complexity. The residents of Aquapolis watched as the chase went on, their homes becoming a battlefield. The tension in the colony was palpable. Every crash and thud echoing through its corridors reminded the residents of the danger outside. Recognizing the need for a new strategy, Commander Jennings coordinated efforts from the control center. Understanding that Subject Delta was intelligent and familiar with their tactics, she knew they needed a more thoughtful approach rather than merely trying to outmaneuver it. In the meantime, Dr. Stanton and other scientists gathered to discuss the possible causes behind Subject Delta's behavior, noting that it was not only attempting to escape, but also acting out in opposition to their actions, with its instincts distorted by their experiments. The Caribbean Sea's inky blackness became a spooky backdrop to the drama unfolding as night fell around Aquapolis. Sarah Jennings, the commander of the command center, formulated a plan requiring precision and courage. She informed her team that they should lead the creature into open water and away from the colony. She explained that they could use a sedative to calm the animal once there, but they needed to get it to come with them without causing more damage. The team used a series of low-frequency sound pulses coming from a submersible decoy to lure Subject Delta. These were similar to the sounds that initially agitated it. The submersible would be remotely operated to guide Subject Delta towards a trap area, where the water is deeper, and sedatives could be administered safely. Emily Stanton knew that despite her concerns about the ethics of the situation, this was their best chance to stop Subject Delta without causing it any harm. Her expertise in marine behavior was crucial to the mission's success. Subject Delta followed the sound of the first pulses from the decoy submarine cautiously but curiously. Residents gathered in safe zones around monitors and watched the unfolding of the operation with great anxiety. Each meter Subject Delta moved away from their homes was met with a collective sigh. As they waited for the outcome, the tension was palpable, a mix of fear and hope present. The trap was placed in deeper water. Following the decoy into the designated area, Subject Delta entered. The team deployed the sedative at the command of Commander Jennings. As the chemicals dispersed in the water, the giant orca began to calm down. It took several hours to sedate Subject Delta, but it was still alive. Dr. Stanton confirmed its stability by monitoring the orca's vital signs. She told the team that it was over, with a mixture of relief and sadness. Aquapolis's people reflected on the events in the aftermath. Slowly, the colony returned to normality. However, these events left a lasting impression on its collective consciousness. The breach was repaired in the containment unit, and new safety protocols were implemented to avoid future incidents. Commander Jennings, Dr. Stanton, and others reviewed the colony's practices to advocate for a more humane treatment of genetically modified marine animals. The incident with Subject Delta opened up a broader discussion on the ethical implications of using such creatures for military purposes. Subject Delta was moved to a facility, allowing it to live in peace without danger to humans. Its story became a case study in marine biology programs worldwide. The encounter with Subject Delta marked a turning point for the residents of Aquapolis. They had survived a deadly cat-and-mouse game, but their lessons would shape the future of this underwater utopia. Now more than ever, they knew their survival depended on their technology and ability to coexist peacefully in the ocean with its inhabitants. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the Australian outback, a land of stark beauty and hidden dangers. Mark, a seasoned wildlife photographer, had ventured into this remote wilderness with a singular goal: to capture images of the elusive saltwater crocodile. Known for their cunning and power, these ancient reptiles had long fascinated him. His journey took him to the dense mangroves along the northern coast, where the saltwater crocodiles reigned supreme. Mark had spent weeks preparing for this expedition. He studied maps, consulted with local guides, and meticulously checked his equipment. His camera, lenses, and waterproof gear were all in perfect condition. He knew the risks involved. The saltwater crocodile was a formidable predator, capable of swift and deadly attacks. Yet the allure of capturing their raw power on film was irresistible. He set out at dawn, the air heavy with humidity and the promise of another scorching day. The mangroves were a labyrinth of tangled roots and murky waters, a perfect crocodile habitat. Mark moved cautiously, his senses alert to every sound and movement. The ground beneath his feet was soft and treacherous, but he was used to navigating rugged terrain. Hours passed as he trekked more profoundly into the mangroves, pausing occasionally to capture the vibrant flora and fauna around him. He photographed colorful birds, stealthy reptiles, and the intricate patterns of the mangrove roots. But the saltwater crocodile remained elusive. Determined not to leave empty-handed, Mark pressed on. As he ventured further, the mangroves became denser, the air thicker with the scent of salty water. He knew he was entering prime crocodile territory. His heart raced with a mix of anticipation and caution. Suddenly he stumbled upon a hidden nest, a cluster of large leathery eggs partially buried in the mud. His pulse quickened. This was a rare find, but he was acutely aware of its danger. He carefully positioned himself to take a few shots of the nest, mindful of his surroundings. The camera clicked softly, capturing the scene. But then a sound behind him made his blood run cold. A low, guttural growl, unmistakable and terrifying. He turned slowly, his worst fear realized. The mother crocodile was emerging from the water, an enormous creature with scales glistening in the dappled sunlight. Her eyes were fixed on him, filled with a primal rage. Mark knew he had inadvertently provoked her by disturbing the nest. Without hesitation, she lunged at him with astonishing speed. Mark barely had time to react. He bolted, his heart pounding, adrenaline surging through his veins. The chase was on. The dense mangroves offered little room for maneuvering. Mark's knowledge of the terrain became his greatest asset. He darted through the twisted roots and thick foliage, using every ounce of his agility to evade the pursuing predator. The crocodile crashed through the underbrush behind him, her powerful tail and massive jaws cutting a path of destruction. Mark's mind raced as he ran. He needed to find a way to lose the crocodile and put enough distance between them to find safety. He remembered a narrow creek nearby, its banks steep and lined with thick vegetation. If he could reach it, he could use the terrain to his advantage. Reaching the creek, Mark plunged into the water, its coolness a shock to his system. He swam quickly, knowing the crocodile was just behind him. The thick vegetation along the creek's banks offered a potential barrier. He used his hands to pull himself along, the water hampering his movements and providing a measure of cover. The crocodile entered the creek with a splash, her massive form slicing through the water quickly. Mark felt a surge of panic but forced himself to stay focused. He swam to the opposite bank, scrambling up the steep incline, mud and roots offering tenuous holds. He glanced back, the crocodile closing in, her jaws snapping inches from his legs. The chase continued with the crocodile's growls, constantly reminding them of the danger. Mark's muscles burned with exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to slow down. He knew the crocodile would tire eventually, her rage giving way to the physical limits of her body. He needed to reach that point before his strength failed him. He spotted a large fallen tree ahead, its trunk forming a natural bridge over a deeper section of the creek. He headed towards it, hoping it would provide a temporary escape route. He climbed onto the trunk, moving quickly across its length. The crocodile reached the tree's base, her eyes never leaving him. She hesitated, the obstacle momentarily stalling her pursuit. Mark used the precious seconds to gain distance. He reached the other side and continued running, the dense vegetation offering a semblance of cover. Mark's mind worked quickly, assessing his options. He spotted a narrow channel leading away from the cover, its entrance partially hidden by thick foliage. It was a gamble, but he had no choice. He darted towards the channel, hoping the crocodile would struggle to follow. The narrow path was treacherous, uneven ground, but offered a potential escape. He squeezed through the foliage, the channel opening up slightly ahead. The crocodile lunged again, but the narrowness of the path hindered her. Mark kept moving, every instinct telling him to flee. The sounds of the crocodile grew fainter, her pursuit slowing. Mark didn't stop until he was sure he had put enough distance between them. He stumbled upon a rocky outcrop, a rare feature in the mangroves. He climbed onto it, using the elevation to survey his surroundings. The crocodile was nowhere in sight. Mark collapsed onto the rocks, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had survived. He lay there momentarily, catching his breath, the enormity of what had happened sinking in. The encounter had been a stark reminder of nature's raw power, the thin line between predator and prey. Mark's thoughts turned to his camera, still strapped to his chest. Miraculously, it had survived the chase. He reviewed the images he had captured, the photos of the nest, and the initial moments of the crocodile's attack. They were raw and powerful, a testament to the intensity of the encounter. After resting for a while, Mark knew he needed to find his way back. He checked his compass and oriented himself. The journey back through the mangroves was slow and cautious. Every sound made him wary, every shadow a potential threat. He retraced his steps, the memory of the chase fresh in his mind. Hours later, he emerged from the mangroves, the sun hanging low in the sky. His boat was where he had left it, a welcome sight. He climbed aboard, stowing his gear and taking a moment to reflect. The outback had tested him and pushed him to his limits. He had faced one of nature's most formidable predators and lived to tell the tale. Mary had always been self-conscious about her weight. As a child, she had been the target of unkind remarks and stares, and those experiences had left her hesitant to engage in activities that drew attention to her body. Vacations, especially those involving swimsuits and beaches, were a particular source of anxiety. Yet here she was in South Africa, having decided it was time to push past her fears. Her family had planned this vacation for months, hoping it would be a time for relaxation and adventure. They had chosen a beautiful coastal town known for its stunning beaches and clear waters. It was a perfect opportunity for Mary to try something she had always been curious about, but too afraid to attempt: snorkeling. On a bright morning, the sky was clear and the water was inviting. Mary decided it was time. She felt excitement and trepidation as she put on her snorkeling gear. Her family cheered her on from the beach, encouraging her. The coolness against her skin was a welcome sensation as she waded into the water. She adjusted her mask and took a deep breath before plunging her face into the water. The underwater world was mesmerizing. Schools of colorful fish darted around her, and the coral reefs were alive with activity. Mary was amazed by its beauty and tranquility. She swam farther out, captivated by the vibrant marine life. She was so absorbed in the experience that she didn't realize how far she had ventured from the shore. It wasn't until she surfaced to adjust her mask that she noticed how distant the beach had become. Panic started to build, but she forced herself to stay calm. She could swim back, she told herself. She just needed to take her time and not exhaust herself. She took a few deep breaths and put her face back into the water, beginning the journey back to the shore. As she swam, she became aware of a change in the water's rhythm. The fish that had been so abundant were now scarce, and an eerie stillness settled around her. She surfaced again, looking around. The beach was still far off, but that wasn't what concerned her the most. It was the shadow she saw moving beneath her. Mary's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what was happening. A great white shark, drawn by her movements, was circling her. Her mind raced, remembering everything she had ever heard about shark encounters. The first rule was not to panic, but that was easier said than done. She knew sudden movements could attract the shark's attention even more. She forced herself to stay still, floating calmly on the surface. Now she could see the shark more clearly, its massive body gliding effortlessly through the water. It was both beautiful and terrifying. She needed to think and devise a plan to fend off the predator. She scanned the water around her for anything she could use as a weapon, but there was nothing. The shark passed beneath her, close enough that she could see the scars on its skin and the cold, predatory gaze in its eyes. She knew she had to act. She remembered reading that sometimes making yourself appear larger and more threatening could deter a shark. She spread her arms and legs wide, making herself as big as possible in the water. For a moment, it worked. The shark veered off, circling at a distance, but it was far from gone. Mary knew she couldn't maintain this position forever. Her muscles were already starting to ache, and the shore seemed impossibly far away. She needed to move, but she needed to do it without drawing the shark back to her. Slowly, she began to swim again, keeping her movements as smooth and steady as possible. She kept an eye on the shark, watching its every move. It was still circling, still interested. Her mind raced with strategies. She remembered that strong, unexpected sensations often deterred sharks. She could scare it off if she could deliver a solid blow to its sensitive snout or gills. She had nothing to use as a weapon, but she did have her fins. They were sturdy and designed to help her swim efficiently. She could use them to kick if the shark got too close. It wasn't much, but it was something. She swam with purpose now, her eyes constantly scanning for any sign of the shark coming closer. Mary's legs were burning from swimming and holding herself, ready to strike. She was exhausted, but she couldn't stop. The beach was getting closer, but she wasn't safe yet. The shark made another pass, closer still. Mary could feel the water churn as it moved past her. She knew this was it. She had to make her stand. As the shark turned for another approach, she readied herself. It came at her and she kicked out with all her strength, aiming for its snout. The impact was jarring, but it worked. The shark recoiled, startled by the unexpected resistance. Mary didn't wait to see if it would come back. She swam as fast as she could towards the shore, her limbs screaming in protest. She could now hear her family's and other beachgoers' shouts urging her on. The water grew shallower, and she could feel the sand beneath her feet. She stumbled and fell, but got up again, pushing herself forward. The shark had stopped following her, deterred by the shallows and the commotion. Mary made it to the shore, collapsing in the sand, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. She lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, before she realized her family surrounded her. They helped her up, their faces a mix of concern and admiration. Mary couldn't believe what had just happened. She had faced her greatest fear and survived. In the days that followed, Mary reflected on her experience. She had always seen herself as weak and incapable. Still, she had discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. She had faced a deadly predator and used her wits and determination to survive. A profound realization changed how she saw herself and her capabilities. The vacation continued, and Mary became more willing to try new things. She went on hikes, explored the coastal towns, and even went snorkeling again, this time in safer, guided environments. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced the worst and come out stronger. A change occurred beneath the surface of the calm waters of the Gulf of California. This disruption of harmony in the marine environment shocked the system. Orcas are majestic creatures that usually inhabit colder waters. However, they were far away from their habitat. The seafloor had been shifted by a massive earthquake, causing anomalies in temperature and water currents. This led the orcas astray on their migration. The first person to notice the confused pod was Dr. Mia Alvarez. She is a marine scientist visiting the area to study climate change's impact on aquatic life. Orcas are known for complex social structures and rely on specific migration routes. They were visibly distressed. They were not suited to the Gulf's warm waters, nor did they have the needed food. The community was already wary when the first incident occurred. Local fishermen encountered several orcas while returning from a late evening fishing trip. Without warning, the orcas surrounded their boat, sleek black and white bodies cutting through the water with alarming speed. One of the fishermen, Carlos, watched in horror as an orca rammed the side of their tiny vessel, tilting it dangerously. The fishermen managed to escape, but the event began a series of dangerous encounters that intensified their fear and anger toward these unfamiliar visitors. Orcas' condition grew worse as the days went by. They were used to eating fatty fish in colder waters, but found survival difficult in these unfamiliar waters. In their desperation, they began to act aggressively. This was a shocking change for an animal known for its intelligence and peaceful nature towards humans. Local fishermen started to report encounters. It became common to see boats returning from fishing trips with damaged nets or ripped ones. One particularly distressing morning, a small fishing boat capsized. Other fishermen barely saved its 2 crew members. The entire community was on edge. Not only were their livelihoods at risk, but also their lives. Dr. Alvarez decided to act after realizing the urgent nature of the situation. Orcas are intelligent and can learn and adapt quickly. She planned to use acoustic signals to mimic orcas' original habitat sounds to guide them back to the natural migration route. She worked with local authorities and other scientists to install underwater speakers on boats. The boats would move slowly northward towards colder water and broadcast the sounds to try and lead the orcas out of the Gulf. Initial tests in controlled environments showed promising results, but doing it in open waters with a wild pod posed a different challenge. The community watched the operation with anticipation. The boats formed a sound corridor extending into the colder, deeper parts of the Pacific to redirect orcas. Dr. Alvarez monitored the orcas' responses from a leading boat and adjusted frequencies and sound patterns to attract their interest. The first day was a slow one. Orcas were curious about the boat sounds, but cautious of them. Dr. Alvarez's team spent the night refining the approach to show that it can influence orcas without resorting to more invasive techniques. The orcas started to follow the sound path more confidently by the second day. Dr. Alvarez closely observed their behavior, noting signs of comfort in the colder waters. The journey was slow and tense, but as each mile northward passed, hope grew for these majestic creatures to be saved. As the operation progressed, the pod adapted to the acoustic guidance. Yet each deviation from the course became a significant challenge, reflecting the unpredictable nature of the wild orcas' responses. As Dr. Mia Alvarez observed the pod of orcas adapting to the direction of the acoustic signal, she felt cautious optimism. As they moved further north, the waters cooled down and became more suitable for orcas. They were also closer to their diet. The marine biologist, her team, and the local fishing community continued pushing further into the Pacific. The journey was long. Orcas showed signs of adaptation but occasionally wandered, perhaps confused by other sounds or distracted by residual warmth currents. Each deviation was a challenge and tested the patience and determination of all involved. Dr. Alvarez fine-tuned the acoustic frequency to mimic orca communication in the wild. Meanwhile, back in the Gulf, the fishermen convened to discuss their experiences. Jose, a seasoned fisherman, expressed his initial resentment and growing understanding of the orca's plight, acknowledging that the creatures were as many victims of circumstance as they were. In the Gulf of California, the locals watched and waited. Orcas had temporarily left the waters so the fishermen could venture out in peace. The attacks were stopped and the damaged boats were being repaired. The actual test would be whether orcas would continue on their new course after the operation ended. After several days at sea, the pod started to display behaviors that indicated they were approaching their habitat. The pod became more active and more often surface breached. Dr. Alvarez viewed these behaviors as signs of positive ecological integration. She explained to her team that they were recognizing home. Her voice was a mixture of fatigue and relief. The plan's final phase began as the boats approached calmer waters containing orcas' natural food. Dr. Alvarez's team slowly reduced the volume of acoustic signals to wean the orcas from human guidance. The process was delicate, similar to taking off training wheels. Too abruptly, the orcas could lose their way, while too slowly they may become dependent on sound for guidance. As the sun began to set on what was hoped to be the final day of the operation, the orcas began to move away from the boats. They became aware of their newly found autonomy. The orcas swam quickly, diving profoundly and surfacing far away from the ships. It was bittersweet for Dr. Alvarez to see the creatures she had guided returning to their natural rhythm. The mission was successful, and the boats returned to the Gulf of California. Dr. Alvarez recorded the final observations and planned to share his findings and methods to prevent similar situations. Local fishermen welcomed the team back with gratitude. Their livelihoods were secure, and they had a renewed respect for their marine neighbors. Dr. Alvarez wrote her report in her temporary office detailing the journey and the emotional and scientific challenges they had overcome. The rescue saved the pod of orcas and strengthened the relationship between humans and animals in the vast ocean ecosystem. After the incident, the Gulf of California returned to its routine with a new alert system and enhanced monitoring procedures, which will help prevent future disruptions. With a heavy heart but a hopeful outlook, Dr. Alvarez left the area, bringing along the echo of the orca calls that had filled her days and nights in these turbulent waters. The Australian coastal city of Cairns provided the base of operations for a large-scale scientific project in the spring of 1993. Known for its vivid coral and marine life, the Great Barrier Reef was also home to one of the ocean's most misunderstood predators, the bull shark. Although many marine biologists worldwide have studied the area for a long time, few have dared to dive into the dangerous world of night diving to witness sharks' nocturnal behavior. That was until the eminent but quiet marine biologist Dr. Emily Carter changed that. Dr. Carter, a Marine Science Institute researcher, had always been fascinated by the enigmatic nighttime antics of sharks, especially the bull shark, which was notorious for its erratic behavior. Her studies concentrated on the behavior of these sharks after dusk, when there were usually fewer people in the water. To learn more about their hunting habits and territorial instincts, it was intended to collect previously unheard-of footage and data. With over 10 years of experience studying marine life, Emily, who was in her mid-30s, was an unparalleled authority on shark behavior. Her last dive would be this night dive, even though she had previously led dozens of successful dives. The seafloor dropped off the reef's edge and into the depths just past where the dive occurred. It was known for its shark population and beauty, with bioluminescent plankton lighting up the water like stars in the night sky. The group had made considerable preparations, arming themselves with emergency supplies, reinforced wetsuits, and cutting-edge underwater cameras. A surface crew and a small research vessel called the Marlin was always on call to step in if something went wrong, and every dive was carefully planned. Two other divers accompanied Carter, a seasoned diver in his late 20s named Bryce Navarro, who served as her assistant, and Leif Stroud, a technician in charge of monitoring the underwater camera systems. Both men had accompanied Emily on multiple expeditions, and despite their cautions, they had complete faith in her abilities. Casting a pale glow on the coral below, the group dove into the dark depths, their lights piercing through the muck. The water was strangely still. The crew noticed that as they approached the 30-meter mark, the vivid hues of the reef vanished into the darkness, leaving only the steady clicks of their oxygen tanks and the sporadic distant hum of a boat engine above. With her eyes searching the waters for any indication of movement, Emily's mind was concentrated. Soon after, something sizable moved in the distance, catching her camera's attention. The shark was a bull, enormously large. The shark's eyes reflected the lights from their cameras as it moved through the water easily, its blunt snout and stocky build. Emily's heart raced with excitement instead of fear. She had been hoping for a close-up photo shoot of a nocturnal predator and now had it. She signaled her team to let them know the shark was nearby. She took her time getting closer. The shark initially swam in a lazy arc around the divers, seemingly unaffected by their presence. It was apparent to Emily not to hurry. Bull sharks were known for acting aggressively toward one another, particularly at night when their senses were more acute. Without notice, they could become hostile. Something changed as she brought her camera focused on the shark. As it started to circle faster and tighter, the creature's body language changed, showing more erratic movements and a sharp tail flick. The realization that she had crossed some invisible boundary caused Emily's eyes to enlarge. The shark had changed from being interested to becoming assertive. The bull shark leaped in an instant. The shark's teeth locked onto Emily's leg, causing an excruciating searing pain. A shockwave raced through her body from the bite force. Her vision became blurry, and the water turned murky due to the blood. She kicked out of instinct, attempting to break free, but the shark locked her in its hold. After spotting the unexpected attack, Bryce and Leif, who had been a few meters away, ran to her defense. Signaling the surface team of the situation, Bryce slammed his hand on the emergency beacon attached to his suit. Meanwhile, Leif tried to frighten the shark away by grabbing a sharp dive knife and slashing at the water. The shark eventually freed Emily after what seemed like an eternity, and vanished as swiftly as it appeared. Emily was bleeding heavily and was now seriously hurt. Her leg was a twisted mess and she was barely conscious. She was fastened to Bryce and Leif's dive line, and they started the painfully slow ascent. As they battled to save her life, every second seemed like an hour. and they were constantly watching the water for any indication that the shark would return. The crew had already hurried to work on the surface. The Marlin was underway before Bryce and Leif broke the surface, as the emergency beacon had set off alarms. Emily had not responded by the time they reached the top. As they hurried back to shore, the crew hauled her onto the deck and started CPR right away. When the paramedics arrived at the dock, it was already too late to save her. Upon her arrival at Cairns Hospital, Emily Carter was declared deceased. Blood loss from the severe trauma to her leg was the official cause of death. The team had tried their hardest to stop the bleeding in time, but the attack had severed an artery. Within the scientific community, the incident caused a stir. Respected researcher Emily was killed, and her passing served as a sobering reminder of the risks that marine biologists must always take. Her tragic demise brought to light the unpredictable nature of these apex predators, even though the risk of shark attacks was statistically low. In response, the regional authorities and academic institutions promptly instituted fresh safety guidelines for night dives. These included more emergency preparedness training, the requirement to use shark deterrent devices, and harsher rules regarding the proximity of known shark habitats. Emily's co-workers used the media following the tragedy to stress the value of comprehending sharks rather than stigmatizing them. Her studies had always focused on coexistence rather than fear. As calls for improved protections for sharks and those who study them increased, shark conservation efforts gained traction. Although Dr. Carter passed away, her legacy endured because of the work she had devoted her life to. Years later, the reef where Emily had made her last dive was marked with a memorial plaque. It honored Dr. Emily Carter, who sacrificed everything to gain knowledge in her quest to unravel the mysteries of the deep. Her experience served as a lesson for other researchers, showing them that no matter how experienced they were, they could never fully control the ocean. Isla Mirada, a tiny seaside community tucked away in the Florida Keys, was a hive of activity in the summer of 2004. Anglers worldwide had flocked to the yearly high-stakes fishing tournament, eager to show off their skills in the pristine Atlantic waters. With a grand prize that had the potential to alter someone's life, the competition had gained prominence over time. As participants readied themselves to venture into the shark-populated waters, boats lined the marina, each outfitted with cutting-edge fishing equipment. Isla Mirada was once called the sport fishing capital of the world because of the abundance of marine life in its waters. The town's ecology has begun to shift in recent years, though. Overfishing and rising ocean temperatures caused by climate change have upset the delicate balance of the marine environment. Residents began to report seeing more sharks, especially the more aggressive species like bull and tiger sharks, and the large predators that had previously stayed farther offshore started moving closer to shore. However, these reports had caused little concern, and the competition continued for decades. On the first day of the competition, excitement was in the air as the sun rose. Tom Reynolds was one of the competitors. Tom, an experienced angler from the Midwest, traveled to Florida hoping to catch the fish to win the tournament. Since he had participated in previous competitions, Tom was no stranger to the ocean. However, there was an extra element of risk this time because, although most anglers would rather deny it, the growing number of sharks made them wary. Throughout the first part of the day, nothing went wrong. As anglers were hauling in trophy fish, the leaderboard began to take shape. Although Tom had already caught several impressive fish on his boat, the Marlin's chase, they needed to be bigger to take first place. He steered his boat farther away from the crowded fishing spots and into deeper waters in an attempt to take the lead, a move that would soon prove disastrous. Almost instantly after tossing his line into the deep blue, Tom felt a strong tug. His rod buckled from the sheer force of what was a huge catch. Tom skillfully worked to exhaust the creature at the other end of the line for the next few minutes by wrestling with it. This started the battle between man and fish. As the fish approached the surface, his heart raced because he could see the shimmering scales of what looked like a massive grouper. Perhaps it was this fish that took home the grand prize. However, there was an abrupt, strong disturbance in the water as Tom started to reel in his catch. A large dorsal fin broke the surface, and in an instant, a massive tiger shark appeared. It circled the boat with alarming speed and aggression, drawn by the struggling fish on Tom's line. The shark's aggressive behavior was frightening compared to its usual behavior. Before Tom could react, the shark sprang at the catch, driving its razor-sharp teeth into the fish and causing it to flail wildly. Tom struggled to keep his balance as the boat shook due to the shark's powerful attack. He released the line, hoping the shark would become disinterested, but it didn't. Rather than attacking the boat directly, the predator ambushed it from below. Panic struck as the impact sent Tom sprawling onto the deck. The shark's unrelenting attack was unmatched by anything Tom had ever witnessed. It circled once more, but this time it shot partially out of the water and struck the boat side with incredible force. Tom reached for the radio to call for help, but the shark struck again before he could contact the competition's headquarters. This time the boat was violently shaken as its strong jaws clamped down on the side. Water started to seep into the boat's hull as one of the stabilizers cracked from the pressure. Tom realized he was in big trouble, and after witnessing the attack, a few other competitors in adjacent boats promptly radioed for help. Rescue boats were sent out, and the competition was stopped immediately. But by the time assistance came, the harm had already been done. Tom's ship slowly started sinking because it was absorbing too much water. The rescue crew saved Tom, but the shark circled the wreckage as though defending its domain. The terrifying event had a ripple effect throughout the competition. The tiger shark's aggressiveness alarmed many fishermen, and rumors of more shark sightings started. While some participants had seen sharks acting strangely near the coast, none had experienced anything as violent as Tom's. Almost immediately after the incident, an investigation was started. Environmental specialists and marine biologists were consulted to evaluate the circumstances. The overfishing in the area reduced the shark's natural food sources, drawing them nearer to human activities. Their findings revealed a troubling trend. Further changing shark migratory patterns have brought them closer to fishermen due to rising sea temperatures. These elements working together had produced an ideal storm of hostility. The Fish and Wildlife Conservation authorities strengthened the area's fishing laws following the attack. More shark population monitoring was done, and new regulations restricted offshore anglers' travel limits during contests. The town of Islamorada also launched initiatives to inform tourists and fishermen about shark behavior and ways to avoid risky encounters. The event permanently scarred Tom Reynolds. Despite surviving the attack, he decided to give up competitive fishing. The excitement of the activity was now overshadowed by the memory of looking into the eyes of a predator that almost killed him. However, his tale warned others, showing them that nature could retaliate violently when pushed to the brink. It was a cool morning in 2002, close to the sleepy fishing village of Hermanus on South Africa's untamed southern coast. The sea, which had long sustained the townspeople, stretches out and shimmers in the meager autumn light. For generations, fishermen had been leaving this location, navigating the Atlantic Ocean currents, lowering their nets, and retrieving their catches. The Sea Spirit, which the crew boarded, was owned by Anders Viljoen. 4 dependable sailors had sailed with Anders for nearly 40 years. The day began like any other, the boat rocking gently as the crew prepared their gear. While Hermanus was known for whale watching, these fishermen ventured out for the rich shoals of fish that provided their livelihood. Anders stood beside his grizzled first mate, Peter de Klerk, at the helm, as the others did their tasks. Sizwe Mokoena, in charge of the nets, was present with 2 younger deckhands who had joined the crew a few years prior, Gert and Don. About 12 nautical miles offshore, the crew headed toward one of their regular fishing locations, a location known as the Deep Blue. Having had a successful season thus far, the men were in high spirits, and the sea was calm. However, as the hours went by and the nets revealed that they were lighter than anticipated, a feeling of unease spread across the boat. When the sun began to set in the mid-afternoon, Gert looked over his shoulder for indications of fish when he noticed something unusual in the water. It was first just a large, slowly moving dark shape beneath the waves. The crew was soon looking over the side of the boat, watching the strange mass lurking below after he called out to the others. At first, Sizwe dismissed it, as he had witnessed numerous odd occurrences in the water over the years. Though something about the shape seemed off, he muttered to himself, "Probably a whale." It was too large to be anything else that came to mind, and it wasn't moving like a whale. The shadow was enormous, with a length almost equal to the boat itself. Peter, ever the cautious one, advised them to avoid it. But Anders took a closer look because he was curious and maybe a little too bold for his good. The water churned as they approached the dark mass, which he approached slowly with the sea spirit. The crew was left speechless as they observed the shadow come closer to the surface and reveal itself as a shark, a great white no less, rather than a whale. It was not what they had ever seen before. They had never seen a shark as large as this one in all their years at sea. It was terrifying due to its sheer size. Its bulk was even more intimidating, with the dorsal fin standing taller than any crew member. What made it worse was its behavior. This shark was aggressive around boats in contrast to the generally cautious, almost indifferent attitude they displayed. The shark started to circle the sea spirit with quick and purposeful movements. Its nose bumped the boat, resulting in a violent rocking of the vessel. The crew realized how predatory the shark was, and they scrambled, eyes wide with terror. That was hunting, not just curiosity. Anxiety arrived. But as the shark kept circling unabated, Anders's composure began to crumble, and he yelled commands. The men seized fishing poles, hooks, and other weapons-like objects to repel the beast. But the creature seemed unaffected by anything. The crew feared the worst, thinking the shark might capsize them as its massive body sent shudders through the hull every time it bumped the boat. Gert and Don, the younger brothers, were especially shaken up. They clung to the rigging for support, their faces pale. Ever the practical, Peter reached for the ship's radio and made a distress call. He was shaking when he told the Coast Guard about their predicament and the shark's size and aggression. A shark acting so hostilely toward a boat was unprecedented. As the minutes dragged on, the shark's attacks grew bolder. It started slamming the boat hard, its jaws snapping perilously near the edge of the craft. It once cracked the skin, exposing rows of sharp teeth and icy black eyes. The crew felt a chill upon seeing it. Their voices could hardly be heard over the roar of the breaking waves and the boats creaking as they shook from the onslaught. They screamed in terror. Although backup was en route, the crew was still determining if they could survive long enough for assistance. Their experience with the shark's behavior was unmatched. It appeared unrelenting, as if propelled by an invisible force. A state of desperation emerged. The shark approached Sizwe, holding a harpoon, and attempted to jab at it, but the animal was too swift and powerful. With a forceful flick of its tail, the shark almost swept Gert overboard, sending a wave smashing over the deck. Don grabbed his brother in time to save him as the water receded. After an eternity, the Coast Guard finally showed up with their larger reinforced vessel slicing through the waves toward the Sea Spirit. Equipped with more advanced equipment, they successfully drove the shark away. However, it required multiple tries and a few precise blows with a specialized harpoon gun before the animal finally withdrew. The crew breathed a sigh of relief as the enormous great white vanished into the depths. Despite having made it through, the encounter shook them. After escorting the Sea Spirit back to shore, the Coast Guard gave the men shock treatments and debriefings. The news soon reached Hermanus, and specialists were called to investigate the shark's peculiar behavior. What they found was concerning. Due to the overfishing in the area, the shark's natural food sources had been reduced, which made it more aggressive in its hunt for food. Furthermore, bigger predators have been drawn closer to the coast due to habitat disruption brought on by rising tourism and pollution, increasing the frequency of shark-human interactions. The experience made Anders Viljoen and his crew acutely aware of how precarious the equilibrium between nature and humanity had become. Weeks later, they were back in the water, but the memory of the enormous shark never left them. The sun rose over the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, casting a golden glow across the waves. A marine research vessel bobbed gently on the water, anchored off the coast of Australia. On board, a team of marine biologists prepared for another day of studying the vibrant coral reefs below. Among them was Rachel, an experienced diver and researcher with a deep love for the ocean and its myriad inhabitants. The team had been in the area for several weeks, documenting the health of the coral reefs and the diverse marine life that called it home. Their mission was crucial, as coral reefs worldwide faced increasing threats from climate change, pollution, and overfishing. The data they collected would contribute to conservation efforts to preserve these underwater ecosystems. The divers suited up, checked their equipment, and reviewed their plans for the day. Rachel was assigned to document a particularly vibrant section of the reef, known for its rich biodiversity. She descended into the clear blue water with her camera and underwater notebook, followed by her teammates. The underwater world was a kaleidoscope of colors and movement. Schools of fish darted between the coral formations, and sea turtles glided gracefully through the water. Rachel marveled at the beauty around her, capturing images and taking notes on the various species she encountered. Her teammates fanned out, each focused on their specific tasks. As she swam deeper, Rachel's attention was drawn to a crevice in the reef. She noticed a movement that seemed out of place. She saw a rare and deadly sea snake, its slender body coiled among the coral. Rachel knew she had to be cautious, but her scientific curiosity urged her to document this unexpected encounter. She positioned her camera to take a few shots, maintaining a respectful distance. The snake, sensing her presence, began to uncoil. Rachel's pulse quickened. She knew that even the slightest provocation could lead to an attack. She decided it was best to retreat slowly and give the snake space. But as she turned to swim away, she felt a sharp pain in her leg. The snake had struck, its fangs delivering a dose of venom into her calf. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She signaled to her team, who quickly recognized the gravity of the situation. Her leg began to feel numb, and she knew the paralysis would spread quickly. Time was of the essence. The team sprang into action, forming a protective circle around Rachel as they began their ascent to the surface. The journey to the surface was fraught with peril. The reef was a complex labyrinth of coral formations, and the sea snake's presence added an element of danger. Rachel's breathing became labored as the venom took hold and her vision blurred. Her teammates supported her, guiding her through the maze of coral with determined efficiency. As they ascended, the team remained vigilant for other sea snakes. The disturbance in the water could attract more of them, and they couldn't afford another bite. Their progress was steady but slow, the weight of urgency pressing on them. Rachel's condition deteriorated with each passing minute, her movements growing weaker. Breaking the surface, the team carefully lifted Rachel onto the deck of the research vessel. The crew had already prepared the anti-venom and medical supplies, anticipating their urgent need. Rachel was laid on a stretcher, and the ship's medic quickly administered the anti-venom, praying it hadn't arrived too late. The venom's effects were swift and severe, and Rachel's body convulsed as the anti-venom began to work. The team watched anxiously, hoping for signs of improvement. They knew the next few minutes were critical. Rachel's breathing was shallow, and her pulse was weak. Still, the anti-venom started to take effect, slowly counteracting the toxins coursing through her system. With the immediate danger addressed, the team focused on monitoring Rachel's condition. They knew that recovery would take time, and that she needed to be evacuated to a medical facility for further treatment. The captain radioed for emergency assistance, and arrangements were made for a helicopter to airlift Rachel to the nearest hospital. The sound of the helicopter's rotors grew louder as it approached the vessel, and she was transported into the plane. The medic continued to monitor her vital signs, ensuring she remained stable during the flight. The team returned to their research with Rachel on her way to the hospital. The incident had shaken them, but they knew their work was far from over. Their data was vital to understanding and protecting the fragile coral reefs. They resumed their tasks with renewed focus, aware that their efforts contributed to a more significant cause. The following days were tense as they awaited news of Rachel's condition. Updates from the hospital indicated that she was stable and responding well to treatment. The venom had caused significant damage, but the prompt administration of the anti-venom had saved her life. She faced a long recovery, but it was a positive one. On a crisp morning in August 2002, a group of friends set out for a kayaking adventure in the pristine waters of British Columbia. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the calm sea. The air was filled with the scent of salt and pine, and the gentle sound of waves lapping against the rocky shoreline created a serene backdrop for the day's journey. The group consisted of 4 friends: Liam Harris, a 34-year-old outdoor enthusiast who had organized the trip; Emma Lewis, a 30-year-old biologist with a passion for marine life; Ben Cooper, a 28-year-old photographer eager to capture the beauty of the wilderness, and Rachel Adams, a 32-year-old teacher looking to unwind from the stresses of the school year. They launched their kayaks from Telegraph Cove, a secluded spot locals favor for its tranquility and abundant wildlife. British Columbia was famous for its rich marine ecosystem, home to seals, sea lions, and various fish species. But the most awe-inspiring residents were the orcas, or killer whales, that roamed these waters. Known for their intelligence and complex social structures, orcas were feared and admired by those who encountered them. As the group paddled into the open water, they marveled at the beauty around them. The sea was a deep blue, mirroring the clear sky above. Emma pointed out a family of seals basking on a nearby rock, while Ben snapped photos of the picturesque scene. The friends chatted and laughed, their spirits high as they embraced the adventure ahead. The date was August 18th, and the day seemed perfect for exploration. The kayakers paddled further from the shore, enjoying the freedom of the open water. With her keen eye for wildlife, Emma spotted the first sign of orcas in the distance, a series of dark dorsal fins breaking the surface. She alerted the group and they all stopped to watch, excited by the prospect of a close encounter with these magnificent creatures. The pod of orcas approached slowly, their sleek black and white bodies moving gracefully through the water. The kayakers felt awe and excitement, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Orcas, known as killer whales, were the ocean's top predators. Despite their name, they rarely posed a threat to humans. However, their size and power commanded respect. Liam, Emma, Ben, and Rachel remained still, hoping to look closer without disturbing the animals. The orcas seemed curious, swimming closer to the kayaks. One particularly young orca caught Emma's attention. It was smaller than the others, likely a juvenile, and appeared more playful. It swam around the group, occasionally breaching the surface and splashing water with its tail. The kayakers were mesmerized by the display and felt privileged to be in the presence of such incredible creatures. Little did they know, the encounter was about to turn dark. The young orca's playful behavior soon became more aggressive. It began nudging Liam's kayak, initially with gentle pushes that grew stronger each pass. Liam tried to keep his kayak steady, but the orca's forceful nudges made it difficult. The group exchanged worried glances, realizing that the situation was becoming dangerous. Emma, with her knowledge of marine life, knew that orcas could be unpredictable, especially young ones who might not yet have complete control of their strength. The group tried to remain calm, hoping the orca would lose interest and swim away. But the juvenile seemed fixated on Liam's kayak, continuing to push and bump it increasingly. The tension in the air was palpable as the friends braced themselves for what might come next. The young orca's behavior escalated quickly. Its playful nudges turned into aggressive shoves, dangerously rocking Liam's kayak. The orca's powerful movements disturbed the water's calm surface, sending waves rippling outward. Liam gripped the sides of his kayak, trying to maintain his balance. But the orca's forceful pushes made it nearly impossible. Emma, Ben, and Rachel watched in growing fear, unsure how to help. They knew that getting too close could also put them in danger. The juvenile orca, seemingly undeterred, rammed Liam's kayak with a sudden burst of energy, tipping it over. Liam was thrown into the cold water, his kayak flipping upside down. Panic surged through the group as they saw Liam struggling in the water. The orca circled, its presence a looming threat. Liam tried to swim towards his overturned kayak, but the orca blocked his path, nudging him with its nose. Each touch was a reminder of the orca's immense power, and Liam's heart pounded with fear. Emma, thinking quickly, signaled to Ben and Rachel to stay back while she paddled towards Liam. She knew they had to act fast to get him out of the water before the orca became more aggressive. The young orca continued to nudge Liam, causing him to gasp for air each time he was pushed underwater. Emma reached Liam and grabbed his arm, pulling him towards her kayak. Sensing the movement, the orca swam closer, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife. Emma's heart raced as she struggled to keep both of them afloat. Ben and Rachel watched helplessly, their kayaks bobbing in the choppy water. Emma desperately tried to drag Liam to her kayak. She held onto him tightly, hoping the orca would back off. But the juvenile orca seemed more determined than ever. It swam around them, creating a whirlpool effect that made it hard for Emma to paddle. The water was now a chaotic mix of waves and foam, each movement of the orca sending ripples of fear through the group. Liam clung to the side of Emma's kayak, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The cold water sapped his strength, and he struggled to stay conscious. Emma knew they couldn't wait any longer. She shouted at Ben and Rachel to paddle towards the shore and get help. They nodded and started swimming with all their might, quick and frantic strokes. Emma kept a firm grip on Liam, her eyes never leaving the orca. The young whale circled them one last time before it seemed to lose interest, perhaps sensing the arrival of more humans. It swam off, leaving the water calm once more. Emma felt relief, but she knew they weren't safe yet. Ben and Rachel reached the shore and alerted a nearby boat. A rescue team arrived within minutes, pulling Liam and Emma to safety. Liam was rushed to the hospital, where he was treated for hypothermia and minor injuries. The group's ordeal had lasted only a few hours, but it felt like an eternity. The kayakers' harrowing experience at Telegraph Cove became a story of survival and the unpredictable nature of wildlife. The young orca's behavior was a stark reminder of the power and unpredictability of the ocean's inhabitants. Liam, Emma, Ben, and Rachel would carry the memory of that day with them forever, their bond strengthened by the shared experience of facing danger together. Beneath a dark, velvety sky sprinkled with stars, a group of eager tourists gathered at the dock, ready to embark on the Sea Whisperer. Nestled in the tranquil waters of the San Juan Islands, the night was shaping up to be perfect for a whale-watching cruise. With a gentle breeze tempering the crisp air, the conditions were ideal. The tourists, buzzing with anticipation, were there hoping to glimpse the majestic and elusive orcas known to frequent these waters. Their excitement was palpable, each person clad in anticipation of meeting these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. James Bennett, an experienced sailor who has spent years in this area, gave a safety briefing and explained what to expect on the cruise. Emily Jackson, an eager young biologist who wanted to see orcas in the wild, and Tom Sanders, a photographer looking to get the perfect shot, were among the tourists. The Sea Whisperer silently glided over the calm ocean as the clock struck midnight. Warm jackets wrapped around the tourists. They anxiously scanned the dark waters. The air was crisp, and all that could be heard were distant marine life and the lapping water on the hull. A ripple appeared in the water. The dorsal slicing gracefully in strength through the water surface was a fin. The Midnight Hunter was a solitary large orca well known by locals because of its mysterious and striking nature. Tom's camera snapped rapidly as Emily's eyes widened in amazement. The orca was swimming alongside the boat, its sleek black body shining in the moonlight. Everything seemed magical for a brief moment. The atmosphere changed suddenly and without warning. The Midnight Hunter dived under the boat and a powerful jolt shook the Sea Whisperer. The tourists were frightened by a loud scraping noise. They grabbed onto anything they could. Everyone was urged to remain calm as Captain Bennett's voice cut through the noise, instructing them to move towards the life jackets. The orca had collided with the boat, resulting in a visible crack in the hull through which water began to seep into the ship. As water pooled at their feet, panic set in. When the boat tilted dangerously, Emily, Tom, and the other tourists raced towards the life jackets to help each other. The passengers' faces were cast in eerie shadows as the lights flickered. Captain Bennett and his team quickly deployed life rafts as the situation escalated. Speaking calmly and urgently, he emphasized the need to evacuate everyone before it was too late. Meanwhile, Emily, confused, noticed the Midnight Hunter circling back, its fins slicing through the water. She exclaimed that it had returned, pointing towards the shadow in the water. Caught between his desire to document the incredible event and his fear, Tom grabbed his digital camera. He voiced his confusion about why the orca was chasing them, his question barely audible above the sounds of rushing water and creaking metal. Emily assisted an elderly couple to enter the first life raft as it was lowered into the water. Quickly ushering everyone, Captain Bennett directed more people onto the rafts, shouting for them to head his way. Meanwhile, the crew diligently counted heads to ensure no one was forgotten in the hurried evacuation. Midnight Hunter passed again, its massive body visible in the moonlight. Orcas are known to be a fearsome predator. Captain Bennett took one last look around as the passengers climbed into the rafts, his expression a blend of concern and composure. He indicated the urgency of moving away from the unsafe vessel. As they slowly left the Sea Whisperer sinking, the small convoy of rafts felt their hearts race. The orca's breath echoed in the darkness, reminding them of their narrow escape. The night was not over yet, and they were safe. The San Juan Islands, looming as the life rafts floated gently in the dark waters, offered a faint promise that safety was near. With his eyes on the horizon, Captain Bennett steered the leading raft. The cold wind and the adrenaline from the ordeal kept the survivors alert. Emily wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, her mind racing with questions about the aggressive behavior of the orca known as Midnight Hunter. She expressed her thoughts quietly, noting that orcas don't often attack boats. Sitting next to her, Tom listened intently, his camera now tucked away in a drawer, rendered useless without any light. Tom nodded with a somber expression. There's got to be a good reason. He speculated about trying to make sense of it. The other tourists were both shocked and relieved. Among them was Sarah Lee, a retired teacher who had long dreamed of seeing an orca in person. She expressed her disbelief to the person beside her, reflecting on the unexpected nature of the encounter. They were enveloped in darkness, with only the flickering emergency lights on their vests and the light from the moon. The sea sounds seemed to be amplified, with each wave crashing into the rafts increasing their anxiety. A loud splash suddenly echoed throughout the night, and several passengers gasped. The Midnight Hunter briefly surfaced, its massive body visible in the moonlight. It then disappeared. Orcas were still nearby, reminding them that their situation was precarious. Captain Bennett remained calm and spoke reassuringly to the passengers, assuring them of their proximity to shore and imminent safety. Despite his calming words, his eyes constantly scanned the water around them, alert to any further dangers. As they neared the islands, a faint siren sound grew louder. Rescue was on the way. The group felt a sense of relief, and the conversation shifted from stories of fear to survival. The group spoke about the crew's swift actions, the captain's steady guidance, and their reactions to the crisis. The Coast Guard arrived and searched the darkness of the sea with powerful beams. The Coast Guard safely transferred the terrified passengers from the rafts into their vessel. As each person boarded, the relief was palpable. They were given warm blankets and hot beverages. Once everyone was safe and accounted for, Captain Bennett briefed the Coast Guard about the incident. He mentioned the necessity of informing the authorities, suggesting that the aggressive behavior might be due to a problem with the orca, or could simply be a fluke. He emphasized the importance of understanding exactly what had happened. The survivors gathered together on the shore as the sunrise painted the sky with oranges and pinks. They were all wrapped in blankets. They were bonded in unexpected ways by the ordeal. Emily and Tom exchanged contact information and promised to share photos and messages. Sarah Lee smiled faintly despite her night of terror. As the news about the Midnight Hunter spread, it sparked debates in the local and national media. These debates focused on wildlife interaction and the safety associated with such tours. As investigations were underway, night cruises were temporarily suspended. Emily, Tom, and the other survivors carried the vivid memory of that fateful night. The sight of the orca's dorsal fins slicing through the moonlit waters haunted their dreams for many years. Midnight Hunter, the lone orca navigating the depths of the San Juan Islands, continued to swim, driven by mysterious impulses that remained unfathomable to those who had witnessed its unsettling behavior. The Ocean Explorer, a research vessel, glided across the calm waters of Monterey Bay in California. Its mission was to map the underwater mountains using advanced sonar technologies. On board the ship was a dedicated team of scientists, including marine scientist Dr. Laura Evans and geoscientist Dr. Mark Thompson. A gentle breeze was stirring the surface of a bright blue sea. The Ocean Explorer had cutting-edge technology to reach the deepest recesses of oceans and reveal secrets that have been hidden for millennia. The data began to flow in as the sonar sent out its regular pings. This created a picture of an underwater landscape on the monitors inside the ship's laboratory. Laura and Mark analyzed the images to find promising geological formations. Unknown to the crew, their sonar waves reached much deeper than the mountains intended to be mapped. The sound waves in the abyssal deeps disturbed an enormous deep-sea orca, known as the Abyssal Phantasm, to those who have seen it. The orca was well adapted to the ocean's dark, crushing depths and its environment's immense pressures. It interpreted the unfamiliar sonar pings as a potential threat, prompting a defensive response. Roused from its hiding place, the massive creature began a swift and determined ascent toward the surface, its movements reflecting urgency and intent. The team was satisfied with their day's work, feeling a sense of accomplishment. However, this tranquility was abruptly shattered when the vessel began to shake violently. An unknown force had collided with its hull, jolting everyone on board. As a large, ominous shadow appeared on the sonar screen, the screens flickered, heightening the tension and uncertainty among the crew. Laura grabbed a table for support. Mark ran to the window and peered out at the water. The outline of the orca was visible, with its black and whitish pattern against the deep blue sea. Perceiving the vessel as an intruder in its territory, the orca initiated a series of aggressive maneuvers. It rammed the ship again, this time with even greater force, resulting in a visible dent in its hull. This assertive behavior underscored the orca's territorial instincts and capacity to defend its domain. On the bridge, chaos broke out. James Reed, the captain, yelled orders at his crew, telling them to stabilize the ship and assess the damages. Given her knowledge of orcas and their behavior, Laura understood that the creature mistook their sonar as a challenge. She told her captain that she needed to turn off the sonar immediately. This could be irritating the orca. Captain Reed shut off the sonar without hesitation. The ship was silent. Only the creaking metal and the waves lapping against the hull were audible. It appeared briefly that the orca was retreating as the shadow disappeared from the sonar display. The crew breathed a sigh of relief as they hoped the orca had calmed down. Their relief, however, was not long-lasting. Abyssal Phantasm, curious and still in a rage, smashed into the ship with a huge splash. The impact sent an ocean wave which sprayed cold seawater on the Ocean Explorer's deck. Laura and Mark looked at each other with deep concern. The orca's movements blinded them without the sonar. They relied only on their few visual sightings in the vast ocean surrounding them. As the sun set in Monterey Bay, the Ocean Explorer crew found themselves in an uneasy dance with one of the ocean's greatest predators. The crew of the Ocean Explorer's exploration mission had become a desperate battle for survival, as they attempted to avoid angering the orca. The Abyssal Phantasm, however, wasn't ready to let the intruders go so quickly. Laura stood on deck and scanned the darkness illuminated by only the dim running lights of the ship. Orcas were now a ghostly sight, only seen occasionally when they surfaced and blew mist from their blowholes into the cold, icy air. Captain Reed spoke to his crew in a low voice while firmly holding the wheel, instructing them to keep the engines low. He was intent on not provoking the situation further. Dr. Mark Thompson and the rest of the science team gathered in the laboratory below deck, where maps were spread out on the table. They were searching for underwater features that might discourage the orca's pursuit. Mark pointed to an inlet near the coast on the map and suggested that the orca might back off if they moved closer to the shallower areas. It was decided to change course. As the ship moved slowly towards shallower water, tension was palpable. As they waited for the orca to follow, every minute felt like an eternity. Laura, who was keeping watch, pointed suddenly towards the stern. The orca appeared again, but its behavior was different. It did not charge, but swam parallel to the ship. The large eye was visible above the surface of the water. Orcas are a constant reminder that the deep sea is unpredictable and wild. They should not be taken lightly. As the ship moved to shallower water, encounters with Abyssal Phantasm became less frequent. The depth of water may be something it wanted to avoid crossing. The silhouette of the coastline became visible with the dawn's first light. The crew was exhausted but vigilant as they prepared to dock. The orca had been missing for a while, so it was hoped it had finally decided to retreat into deeper waters. As the ship docked, it was then that the events of the previous night began to sink into the crew. The orca's mighty presence was evident on the hull. Captain Reed and the crew briefed local authorities and started discussions about the implications of the experience for future research. Laura and Mark shared their story with other marine scientists and presented their collected data. Understanding the Abyssal Phantasm's behavior was essential to manage future encounters safely. It was a big deal in the community, and there were plans to thoroughly study the area while respecting the boundaries set by the wildlife. The Ocean Explorer experience reminded those aboard of the delicate balance between the human desire to know and the sacredness of nature. The ocean is not a mere subject for study, but a living, breathing entity that deserves respect and consideration. They had learned a valuable lesson from the mysterious abyssal phantasm, a mysterious protector of the deep. As they left, memories of those hours of tension at sea, a story of human endeavor and the untamed spirit of the ocean, lingered. 2006 Makapu'u, one of the most well-liked but dangerous beaches on the Hawaiian island of Oahu, was bathed in a sun that set over its immaculate sands. Makapu'u attracted surfers worldwide who are keen to test its formidable waves because of its reputation for having strong rip currents. However, the waters supported species, and few people dared to consider them below the surface. Although reef sharks are a normal part of the ecosystem, their presence has increased sightings in recent years, which has alarmed lifeguards and beachgoers alike. Over his 10 years as a lifeguard, Jake Thompson logged many hours patrolling the shores of Makapu'u. Jake was well known in the neighborhood for his steadfast commitment to beach safety. He was tall, athletic, and composed under all circumstances. His vigilant nature saved numerous lives, earning him the respect of surfers and fellow lifeguards. Jake was an experienced sailor, but he had never encountered anything like what would happen that fateful afternoon. When the sun was at its highest and the beach was most crowded at noon, Jake saw a surfer struggling far out in the water. Jake observed the telltale signs of someone caught in a rip current from the tower as the surfer board bobbled heavily in the rolling waves. He scrambled into the water, slicing through the surf with practiced efficiency, and grabbed his rescue board without hesitation. Jake could see the fear in Max Harrington's eyes as he paddled closer to the troubled surfer. Max is a young man in his early 20s. Max had been dragged far from the coast's safety, and trying to swim back had only made him feel more exhausted. Before things got worse, Jake realized he had to take swift action. There was a giant reef shark nearby, but Jake and Max did not realize it at the time because of the disturbance in the water. 6 feet long, the shark had been hunting fish in the deeper waters just past the break. However, the shark's interest had been aroused by Max's frantic attempts to escape the current, as evidenced by his splashing. It began to circle, moving closer and closer to the two figures in the water. As Jake reached Max, he gave him clear instructions on how to stay calm and hold on to the rescue board. However, Jake noticed a shadow moving quickly beneath the surface, and he started to pull them both toward the shore. His heart raced as the shark's silhouette came into full view, its sleek body cutting through the water like a torpedo. Jake put himself between Max and the shark without thinking twice. Though nothing had completely prepared him for this particular situation, his training had taught him how to handle encounters with marine life. Though he was aware that sharks seldom attack people on purpose, given how unpredictable the scenario was, there wasn't much margin for error. During the shark's initial pass, Jake could observe its icy dark eyes as it swam near them. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, he used his rescue board to form a barrier and pushed the board in the direction of the shark, hoping to scare it away. Even after the shark turned away, it remained. Jake sensed the tension in the water, the spontaneous energy of a predator evaluating its target. The shark circled for several drawn-out minutes. Jake used all his strength to hold onto the rescue board and keep his body between Max and the shark while making eye contact. Though remaining motionless was also out of the question, he knew that abrupt movements might incite an attack. It was a risky dance that could go wrong at any time. The shark abruptly changed its direction. With terrifying speed, it lunged toward Jake, its jaws snapping open. Jake instinctively shoved the board forward, but the shark's powerful body slammed into him, its sharp teeth grazing his right leg. Pain shot through Jake's body as he felt the sting of the bite, but he didn't let go of the board. Jake thought this was it for a split second as the blood mixed with the salt water. It was terrifying. However, the shark retreated, possibly frightened by the opposition. It made a turbulence-filled wake as it swam off into the deeper waters. Although the threat had subsided, Jake still faced difficulties. He was starting to lose strength and his leg was bleeding profusely. After realizing the situation's seriousness, Max grasped the board and did his best to assist Jake. Jake led the two of them back toward the shore, where other lifeguards had already noticed the disturbance with sheer determination. They dove into the water, saving Jake and Max. Although Jake's leg was promptly bandaged, it was evident that he had suffered a significant injury. Jake was quickly taken to the closest hospital by ambulance after one arrived. Jake's brave deeds caused word of them to travel fast around the island. Though wounded, he had prevented a potentially fatal shark attack and preserved Max's life. His courage was a focal point for the neighborhood, igniting discussions about beach safety and the need for more effective shark monitoring programs. With marine biologists, local authorities started implementing new safety measures, such as increased monitoring of shark activity and educational initiatives to encourage coexistence between people and sharks. Although Jake Thompson took a while to heal, the scars on his leg were a constant reminder of the day he survived a shark attack. His deeds prevented a fatality and altered public opinion regarding the precarious equilibrium between marine preservation and ocean recreation. The episode represented resiliency for all those who lived near the Makapuu waters, not just for Jake.